came across an interesting little opportunity in a project I was working on. I wanted to add motion to a very specific area of a photograph. I took this shot here of this train passing under this bridge in San Diego. I love the image, but I thought, how cool would it be if that train was moving? If I was able to use a long exposure on this train and create it as more of a motion blur rather than a freeze frame. We're going to use the path blur tool, and I'll show you some of the problems I ran into and how I address those also. Okay, here we go. I'm going to right click and I'm going to open this image in Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do is just uncheck the little padlock here just to unlock the background and turn this into a layer. Again, what we're going to do is add a motion blur to just the train to make it look like there's movement. So I'm going to zoom in on this and just kind of see what we're working with here. You can see that we've got some, train visible between the pillars of the bridge here. And the train isn't just a single shape, it kind of dips and so we've got some interesting shapes to work with. We've got some plants that are going to get in the way, so I'll show you what I did. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is zoom in a little bit more here. I'm just going to focus on this visible part of the train here first. So what I'm going to do is grab this little lasso tool, and it may not be visible. You might need to just click on the little selection tool on the bottom there and make sure you pick your lasso tool, and then hold down Option, and then I want you to click along this train path. Now we've got to think ahead a little bit, because what we're going to do is add a blur to everything that is selected, and with these little dips in the train, they do present a little bit of a problem. The first way I'm going to do it is just ignore, and I'm going to blur out all of this, which I think is going to be a better look. Hold down Option and continue to click along the points that you want to select. And again, I'm just gonna disregard those little dips in the train, and I'll show you why we're gonna do that in a little bit. And here I am actually going to follow it, because we have this little building behind the train here. So I'm gonna just follow that. I'm gonna click off screen here. I'm going to come down to the bottom of these train cars, select our point here, and we're going to follow the path of the train once again, just ignoring those plants like this. So we have this whole rectangle selected, so it's going to blur out everything within this selected area. But here's what it's going to look like. We're going to go up to Filter, and we're going to go down to Blur Gallery. There are a couple ways to do this, but I'm going to pick Path Blur. And so that's automatically going to create that blur. But you see, all it did is blur it out. It didn't really create that motion. But here we have this arrow tells us which direction the blur is going. So we're just going to change that direction to follow the direction of the train. So we want our blur to go like that. And then we can create as much blur as we want with our speed slider here. I'm just going to move that up to 200%. See, and we do that, it looks like that train is really moving. That train's moving quick. So then we can slow it down a little bit, or we can speed it up a lot. That's too fast. We do not have bullet trains in San Diego, so I'd probably go somewhere around 150, 200, I don't know. That seems about right to me, considering the speed that the trains are moving through here. I think I'm pretty happy with this, actually. And you see, if we followed the contours, then we would have that little chunk out, which wouldn't really make sense, because a moving train, you're not going to have that little visible section between the train cars visible. So I'm going to click OK and just let Photoshop do that. It happens pretty quick. I'm going to deselect, and so now we have this, and we do have, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see this, but we have this problem here. So that's something that we're going to address, but not just yet, because that just looks super dumb, and you know me, don't be dumb. That's a rule, don't be dumb. Okay, so now we have a blurred out train, but the pixel peepers among us are going to zoom in and check out our work to see how we did. And they're going to say, wait a minute, how come this part of the train isn't blurred out? And you're going to be like, well, I forgot. And so we're going to do the very same thing here inside these little columns. So again, we're just going to hold down Option, and we're just going to make our selection of the part that we want to select and blur. And it's going to look that. And we do the same thing. Filter, blur gallery, path blur, and then what do we pick? Something like 160, 154, somewhere in there. It's gonna be just fine. But then once again, we need to make sure that we change the direction of our blur so it doesn't look super dumb. Okay, click OK there, deselect, and then we're going to do that one more time over here. So hold down Option and select our points. Like so. Make sure that they're connected. And then we're going to do that one more time. Filter, blur gallery, path blur. Just doesn't have to be perfect. So somewhere around there, and then we're going to change our direction once again. Something like so, and then we're going to click OK. And we're going to deselect. And then let's zoom out and just kind of see the overall look. I like it. I like it. We got that fast moving train under the bridge. I think that looks pretty cool, except for this. So what do we do about this? Well, there's a couple things that we can do, but one of the things that is super quick and easy is to use our clone stamp tool. And so what if we just select the size? That's about the right size. So we can select our size up here of the area. And so this is 125. Hardness, I don't know, play with it. If you go all the way up, then you're gonna just get like perfect circles, and we don't want perfect circles, but we also don't want it to be super blurry either. So that's what your hardness does. You have to experiment with that and see where it makes sense to be. I'm probably gonna stick somewhere around 20%, and the pixel size of 118 is gonna be just fine. And so then we hold down the Option key to select the area we want to clone. So if we just select this area and then just start kind of painting in some of this, just over that border area that we had selected for the blur. And you might have to get a little bit creative and select different areas so that it doesn't look dumb. The thing is, when you're dealing with this clone stamp brush, you start to get repeating patterns, and repeating patterns are a clear giveaway that we've done some work. So we want to avoid repeating patterns, and we're going to disclose that we did some work anyway, but we just want our work to be somewhat quality, where someone's not going to look at it at first glance and say, oh, this is obviously digitally altered. Again, when this is posted online, I'm somebody who's going to say, this has been digitally altered. I applied a blur to just the train area. Of course, that's just personal, not just what I feel should be done in photography. Personal preference, I choose to go with the truth. So take that for what it's worth. So anyway, something like that. And then down here, we might do some of the same. There's a couple ways we could handle this. Actually, if we wanted to, we could grab our blur tool and increase the size of that. I can increase the size of that with an open bracket or close bracket here. So we could just blur out that harsh line, which will work. We have to take some time and just add that blur just to make it less distinguishable. So that's one way, just blur out that harsh line so it's not there. Or the other way is to grab our clone tool again, we'll make that one smaller this time, and just select some of that track in there maybe. We just want that line of where we selected that blur to be super soft and not visible. So something like that's gonna work out just fine. And then let's just take a closer look, because we got some harsh lines here. So again, that might be a case where we bring out our blur tool and just soften up that harsh line. Just little details. You don't have to do that, but just makes it just a little bit, a little bit of a finishing touch to it. And then if we just look, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. If we come out back to full size again, we kind of have some repeating patterns down here, so I might just go back into my clone tool and just select an area and just maybe remove some of those flowers so they don't look so repeating. Of course, it's all just personal preference on what you think looks good. So I'm not going to say that this is perfect, but it's enough to give you an idea of what to do when you have just certain areas that look like there's a harsh transition where some sort of digital alteration has happened. Just a good way to go in there and clean some of that up with your blur tool or your clone select tool, and just play with it and paint in a little bit. Like, this is where the border between photography and art starts to come through. So at what point does this cross from being a photograph to being a digital art piece? I don't know where that line is. I think that's something that you need to decide for yourself. For me, I think this is fairly extreme, so I probably, I'd call this a digitally altered photograph. But again, it really just kind of depends on your comfort level on what you want to portray as photography. So I'd probably leave it something like that. Once we're zoomed out, that's going to look, because we see every single detail. I think a normal viewer isn't going to go in there and focus in right here and notice some of this. They might, but I think for these purposes, it's pretty good. I'm going to take this sign out though, because I don't like this big white sign sitting here. So to do that, I'm going to use Photoshop's spot healing tool. And then I'm just going to select that tool, and then I'm just going to paint around that area and let Photoshop say what needs to happen. Didn't do a great job. I'm going to do it again here, and I'm going to do it again because it's not doing a super great job. That's much better, much better. Okay, so we'll zoom out again, and we look like that. So we've gone from an image like this, a static train moving under the bridge, to an image like this, which adds just a little bit of motion and a little bit of movement to that image. When we're done, we'll just click the close button here in Photoshop, make sure we hit save, and we're not going to do any compression, and I choose to save it in Macintosh. I'm going to hit OK. It thinks there's multiple layers here. There's not. I'm going to click OK. So it's going to close it down in Photoshop. It's going to open it back up in Lightroom, and then you can make further edits to the color and however you wish. That's a quick, easy way to use the Path Blur tool to add motion to a very specific area of your photograph. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let me know what you would like in future videos. What would help you the most to learn in your photography and photo processing journey? I'm here to help. Please let me know, and I will see you next time. Thank you.